Welcome to Martial Wisdom. Here you can listen to conversations on all kinds of topics related to martial arts. Today's discussion is with John Keeley, who contacted me about his interest in re-examining how he would teach Aikido if he started a group from the ground up. This would include scrutinizing absolutely everything and how to go about doing it in a better way. It's difficult to pick a simple name for the episode, so for lack of a better term, I have picked the name Aikido Renaissance, which is a revival or rebirth. You've probably noticed that episodes have not been coming out as frequently as they have in the past. This is from a combination of things, but I still love putting this material out for all of you. I wish there were more hours in the day. I'm still adding videos every week to the Spirit Aikido online program, which now has over 350 videos. In the latest series, I covered an initial response, which is useful for a wide variety of attacks. The purpose is to eliminate the confusion over how to respond by making the decision process simple and fast. I show a number of different endings and options to train and experiment with, all of which are simple and high percentage. I encourage you to check it out. My profound thanks to those who have subscribed to the program and those who have contributed to the PayPal tip jar. I hope you enjoy this episode. Now, on with the discussion. Well, hello and welcome to Modern Aikidoist Podcast. This episode has got me very excited to discuss, and we're going to be talking about, we have a hard time naming this one, but we're looking at something like shaking the tree of Aikido. We're going to be looking at how we train, rebuilding the way that a dojo operates, how we train our students, how we attract students, everything about starting a group, or about reimagining or redesigning how we do what we do from an instructor standpoint, from how the art develops standpoint. John, would that be a good way of describing it? By the way, this is John Keeley. I apologize for not introducing you sooner. He contacted me a little bit ago. I'll let him tell his background story. I find it absolutely fascinating. This is the kind of guy that I want to get on the mat and train with and talk with, because he's just got such a great background and such a great attitude and perspective. So welcome, John.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here, wherever we are.
in the ether world.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. Just give you a little bit about my background. I've been involved in the martial arts since about the age of 4, which is a hell of a long time. So, and I have been through quite a few. I was once dubbed a martial tart. My main thrusts have been started with judo, went into traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu, and then into Aikido. And then I joined the police in the UK. And because of my martial art background, they pretty much automatically made me what they call an officer safety trainer. So I've been training police officers. Did that for about 20 years, kind of slipped off the wagon a bit and ended up training in Krav Maga in Israel, and running Krav Maga sessions in this country, and have floated back to Aikido. So I've spent probably about the best part of 20 years training police, and another 10 years on top of that training private security all around the world, in some interesting places like Libya, which was very interesting. And what I've now done, I discovered your podcast, and I have to say a massive thank you to you and to the guys on your podcast who have inspired me. You are definitely influencers, a lot of you, and you have some absolute legends on there. Some of the people you have on are just so subject matter experts. They are brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And it's inspired me to get off my arse and actually do what has been rattling around in my head for years. And that is the Aikido we train in the dojo doesn't transpose to the real world. And having had a massive amount of exposure to actual real world violence. I was on counter-terrorist units, so I've gone right up to a very, very high level of extreme violence. And I've also worked the doors. So I've seen all the worst things us human beings can do to one another. And the Aikido that I use, because when you go into violence as a police officer or as a security operator, you go in with a level of responsibility. Okay. What I liked about Aikido was that this is a scalable skill. Okay, a punch in the face is a punch in the face. It doesn't really scale up or down. Certain Aikido techniques that they're completely scalable because you still have a duty of care for this drunk, violent person that you're dealing with, or whoever it is you're dealing with. You still have a duty of care for them. And throughout my 30 years law enforcement security, I would say 90% of my responses to a violent situation has been to use the Aikido techniques, which proves they work in the real world scenario. They do work, but they have to be applied correctly. So I'm looking to formulate, and I'm going to throw myself out there to the world. There will be people who are aghast, people who will tag not only me, but you as well, Tristan, as heretics. Yes.
Oh, that's already been done. That box has been checked a long time ago.
Our effigies will be burnt. But I'm looking to. I have an idea in my head on what I'm actually doing at the moment, and I have to say the podcast has been really helpful with this. Is like Michelangelo's David. He chipped away the bits of the granite that weren't David in his mind, and I'm looking to chip away the bits of Aikido that in my head are not what I want Aikido to be. Now, don't get me wrong. If people want to go and train what they now call it the traditional style of Aikido, that's great.
Yeah, I like the word contemporary.
Contemporary.
The contemporary Aikido, yeah.
But if they wish to go, people should be able to do what they want. And what I want to do is offer another service that is an Aikido that is personal safety and also third-party protection, so that you have the ability to look after yourself and anybody else you're with, using the Aikido techniques and using the spirit of Aikido, which I think still needs to go through the spirit Absolutely. Of Aikido. But the training side of things, I think there needs to be the option to train for reality. And I hate the phrase reality-based martial arts because as we spoke about, I have taught medieval sword fighting with lightsabers, so I have done the proper fantasy martial arts. I've done it, so I don't like the phrase reality because in theory, they're all reality, unless you're doing it on a VR headset. So that's where I'm going. And yes, you and Stephen and Matt, Duncan, and Ellis, absolute genius, absolutely. Yeah. Just phenomenal. A lot of stuff rattling around in that head of his. Sometimes I can't keep up with him. I'm not bright enough. Sorry, Alice.
I have the same thing. I love hearing what he has to say, and it's funny. He'll often say, like, "Do people get bored with me? Like, why would you want to have me back on?" Like, we're far from bored.
Yeah, but all of you guys have kind of lightened. Put the fire under me, if you like, to actually get me out there and do it. Well, hence the fact I'm here, and hence the fact I reached out to you.
Yeah, and just to let everybody know, when John and I, we had a talk last week where we just sort of got to know each other a bit and sort of geeked out on our love for Aikido and where we'd like to see it go. And it went for a long time. John's background could keep us here for a half an hour before we actually get started on this discussion. So at points where he's got some great relevant background, we're going to come back to it a little bit and have him elaborate. But I want to say that of the sources that I've always looked for, and I very much have a great respect for Bruce Lee when he looked at his martial art this way. He left no stone unturned. He looked at every other art that he could get his hands on, from boxing and wrestling to fencing and just anything he could to pick out what is useful from this art. I likewise looked around at martial arts and sports, all kinds of things to find out, okay, what is each particular art has that's useful, and then how do I sort through it and what do I gather? And I kind of came across, it was Ian Abernathy's
martial arts map, which reflected exactly what I had noticed about there. There was like 3 realms of martial arts that a martial artist tends to be from. One is the sport. This would be wrestlers, kickboxers, those who get into a ring and they go full tilt on each other under some kind of a rule set.
Mm-hmm.
Then there are the theoretical martial artists, and that's most of those of us that train in a dojo. We tend to hyper specialize on technical performance, and sometimes to the detriment of losing sight of things that aren't in our direct focus, that we don't work on. And then the third one, which I just used to call crazy town, which is full on reality. Your life is on the line.
Mm-hmm.
Art. And because obviously with anything, as I looked at starting my dojo and how do I run it and how do I teach my students, since I'd been coaching fighters for a long time, I always had in mind, okay, what do I need my student skills to be capable of doing? What am I creating? What am I trying to have them be? Into what is a success? Define what would I be as a successful trainer or a coach? And what is their success that they're striving for? Because if that's not there, all I'm doing is wasting time, my time and their time. And what I found coming back to these 3 realms of martial arts is that if I am looking to have my students be capable of self-defense in a real world environment, there's only limited stuff from the sport realm, which is useful. There's only limited stuff from the theoretical martial arts realm, which is useful. Although, and we'll get a bit into the credibility thing, even though there are very high-ranked people that are very prestigious, long-time martial artists from the theoretical realm, there's champions of sport that have their credibility with their trophies and their awards. That third realm is where I was the most fascinated. The people that have made their martial art work in a real live environment with no rules, no time limits, no limitations by their opponents at all. They could be armed. They could be multiple opponents. That is the realm to me that seemed to have the best fit for what I was looking for. Alongside of exactly what John talked about, that duty to care. And absolutely, police officers have it, security professionals have it. It's also something that the average citizen, whether they have a job that exposes them to violence or not, needs to have. And that could be, a father or a mother who wants to protect themselves or their family without going to jail for the rest of their life because they hurt somebody unnecessarily, because that's a threat to their safety as well. The fact that they could be removed from their family or they could be in jail. So I see that parallel is there, and this is why I'm so drawn to those who have real world experience with such violence and how it has changed their focus from maybe they had a sport background or maybe they had a theoretical martial arts background. What all of those people say that I've talked to is that for them, Aikido, just like John just said, Aikido is what they have found works extraordinarily well to fulfill not only their requirement for safety and self-protection, but also to make sure that they don't use excessive force or violence and either end somebody's life or injure them severely or wind up in prison.
Yeah.
And so that to me that's my personal focus, what I've been fascinated with. Would you say that your perspective kind of fits along there?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I am in the UK a court expert witness in use of force. So I will go to court, and use of force falls into 2 categories. Firstly, it's the legislation. What is use of force? And we have 3 pieces of legislation that cover use of force for everybody, not just there's a whole load for police and customs and immigration. They will have their own bits, but for 3 pieces that cover everybody. But also the psychology and physiology of what's going on in that highly stressful situation. And over the years, I'm fortunate to have enough training to actually understand that whole fight or flight
Sure.
mess. It's and a word I've nicked from you, and I've actually started using it in the security training of the hoplology. It's a brilliant word.
I love it too. In fact, that's one of the ones we talked about, but nobody knows what it is. But for those who may wonder, hoplology is the science and study of human combative behavior. Like everything, whether it's not so much like missiles and tanks and ships as much as hand-to-hand combat, hand-to-hand weaponry, going back to ancient ages.
I want to find out how you can get a doctorate in hoplology, because I think that's got to be great. But the whole thing is a study. It's a study in duality, because you have fight, flight, you have rational brain, emotional brain, with monkey and lizard brain, which I think is a bit cruel for monkeys and lizards. So I'm fairly sure a lizard can be emotional.
Go ahead. Before we go on, I also want to say that my analysis of the sport arts and of the theoretical, they do have their strengths. As a longtime sport fighter, I will tell you that there is sport fight psychology. There is a mind game that goes on between an opponent, you and your opponent within there, and you won't teach a successful competitor unless you can get them to understand how to navigate that mind game and do it really well. But it's different from the psychology that you're talking about. And this is the difference that I'm speaking of when I talk about that real world violence. It has to include the psychology of what you're talking about, of reading, aggressive body language, things like that. Those are things a sport fighter does not need to do. So I wanted to jump in with that as we go on.
Certainly, I have dealt with a lot of very, very capable sport fighters out there in the pavement arena, as some people would like to call it.
Sure.
And they are very, very capable. Let's not get this wrong. The sport fighters are fighters. They certainly when I was working, I used to run door teams down the coast in Brighton here, which is an absolute party town. You're looking at a town that has 366 liquor licenses within a mile of the station. It is an absolute party town. And we had an MMA fighter who basically knocked out 3 doormen before a couple of us crept up quietly behind him, jumped on him, and choked him out. But nobody ever wins a fair fight, do they?
That's right.
So there are, the sport fighting realm does produce some very, very capable, tough people.
Absolutely. And they're usually notable athletes, notable athletic ability, which is not to be overstated.
But what most sort of trained fighters, they have that great responsibility that comes with it. That's like Spider-Man. And so they're not likely to be involved. I'm probably getting this wrong. I'm getting this third, fourth, fifth hand, but only 1% of people are actually trained in martial arts. And of that 1%, only 1% of that are any good. The rest of them are the people that did, I did 3 years of judo when I was 5, sort of thing. Right. So we've got a very, very small framework of trained people that we're actually likely to come up against. And if we are going to come up against, there's another small fraction of that are actually going to be aggressive towards us. You've been in the martial art world for a very long time, and so have I, and they're the nicest people on the planet.
Absolutely.
Across the board. Some of my dearest friends are people who I've trained with in martial arts. The people who you meet who you haven't seen for years, and it's like you only saw them last week.
Right.
So we've got a very, very small framework of capable opponents out there, very small. So you that whole this will never work against a trained fighter. Well, the chances of coming up against a trained fighter are very, very slim. And the beauty of Aikido is it doesn't follow a set of rules like sport fighting. That's what I liked about it. But in my mind, certainly going back to 30 years ago, my first Aikido class, to me, it was everything a martial art should be. Bear in mind, I've been through judo and jiu-jitsu. Aikido seemed to be everything that a martial art should be, because it had that's still got that spiritual side, which I don't want to get rid of.
Mhm.
I'm not looking at chopping that out. I want the spiritual side. I want the Kwai Chang Caine.
Right. Yeah, the strong philosophy aspect is, I think, invaluable. And it's not to say other arts don't have their own philosophies as well. They do. But I agree with you. It is tempered. To me, the philosophy is what keeps, and even the Greeks talked about this back in Plato's time, of it is the philosophy that keeps the fighter from becoming a brute.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and certainly very, yeah. I've been involved in quite a lot of violent altercations, and the trained fighters are very, very few and far between. And if they go aggressive, like the MMA fighter in Brighton, drink and drugs.
Mhm.
When we met him when he wasn't on drink and drugs, nicest guy. Again, lovely guy. So we've got that issue to deal with. So my idea is to chop away lots of bits, and what I want left is a good self and third party protection system that could be trained in the spirit of Aikido, but maybe in the style of Krav Maga. So we're still I don't see Krav Maga as a martial art. I see Krav Maga as a quick fix personal survival system. It will enable you to survive a violent street altercation without due regard to anybody else. I refer to it as bash, crash, and dash, which is actually what it is. It was designed to be learned quite quickly and easily remembered, and easily replicated. So it kind of it does that, but there's not much art to it, should we say?
One of the things that, and I examined some Krav Maga as well, because back 20 years ago it was sort of the new thing, and it had its fad day. What I realized was not very applicable was that it was designed as a military art. It was military combatives. And you could look at the same thing back to World War II combatives, or anything you teach a soldier, there is zero regard for the other person. And the only thing that matters really is killing the other person as quickly as possible. And to me, that did not fit the civilian environment that I'm looking to train myself and my students for, because that will get somebody in a world of trouble very, very quickly if they're good at it. Now, I'll give Krav Maga its points for having, like Bruce Lee, went through and picked out what it found useful for many arts. It did collect a very good assembly of effective methods and techniques. Most were seemingly based on pretty much expressing 100% intensity in an explosive fashion, and not overwhelming the curriculum. I like that part. It was not a huge library. It was, we needed to have somebody trained to be effective and stay alive and kill as quickly as possible, and we're going to condense this into a very sensible, easy to teach form. I liked that part. Where I've seen Krav Maga evolve to was it now wanted to evolve, and it is evolving into trying to be a civilian art by saying, well, we want to cause the minimum amount of damage possible to achieve our safety. Is that a square peg into a round hole? Maybe it is. I don't know. I haven't been watching exactly how their art has fulfilled that attempt to claim to be good for civilians to use when they could be charged with using excessive violence. But that's kind of my take on Krav Maga and what usefulness it has.
Yeah, I treat it like a first aid course.
Sure.
You go and do the course, and then you know it, and then you go away, and maybe 3 or 4 years later you come back and do a couple of days refresher and go, oh yeah, got it again, off you go. And that's kind of what it is, and it should be treated like a first aid course, because it's stuff you learn that you hope you never have to use.
And I would put also and because since then, now we seem to be at another evolution where combatives are becoming a big thing again, and there's some really great stuff out there that I have wide respect for. I've even trained myself in combatives form, because there may be a time and place where releasing 100% intensity and going absolute crash and bash, you might have to do that. It might come to that's what is needed for your survival. So I'm not discounting it, but having that be your entire training focus, just to be a beast and unleash it, I equate that to having a firearm. I know you guys in the UK don't have many over there, but here in the US, carrying a pistol or a gun is a fairly common thing. And most of the people within that realm seem to think it is the one and only solution they will ever need. And that could not be farther from the truth. And it's a dangerous myth to embrace when you don't have anything else. And so I view it, the combative stuff, kind of the same way. Great material, but that's kind of only suits a small percentage of engagements where you are justified in beating somebody to a pulp, very, very quickly. I mean, it makes for impressive YouTube videos to see what those guys do, but applying it for real, from a sensible, civilized person standpoint, is not comprehensive.
If you look at the British police firearms tactics, and it's probably pretty much the same with your SWAT guys, you would go in very, very aggressive, very loud, very big, blah, 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 take control of the person, and then calm down.
Right.
I mean, I've been on firearm teams where we've arrested someone. Once we got control of them and searched them, we've taken the cuffs off. We've sat them down, dusted them down, and checked if you've got any injuries. And that's what Aikido gives you. It gives you that ability to be very strong, and then just bring it down at the end. I've got control of him. I don't have to keep beating him. And Krav Maga is a hammer, and if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, doesn't it? Whereas Aikido, the beauty of it is this scalable response, because not everybody is a nail. Some are. They have very, very, very different attributes. So having something that you can, prime example, Ariminagi. Yes, you can smash someone into the planet very hard. Yeah. And I think
that can be a lethal technique for sure.
Yeah, you can hit someone a lot harder with the planet than you can with a fist, which is brilliant. Or you can just take them down gently. The same technique that is just completely scalable. Yeah, you don't have to smash them into the floor. You can roll them down to the floor and take control of them. Yeah. So that's what I'm looking at, and I'm looking at giving people that scalable response. But what I'm looking to do, and this is where, and I'm going to throw myself open to the world. So if anybody wants to chip in and help me, not with guidance, just with some ideas, really. And certainly I picked up a load off of your podcasts. I want to deliver, and I think I said this a minute ago, I want to deliver Aikido training with a Krav Maga flavor. So we are training with that intensity. The attacks will be real attacks, real world attacks. Obviously, you start slow, but in my experience, I don't think I've seen anybody with a Shomanuchi, Yokomanuchi.
It's funny on that. Again, I very much on the same page. In fact, I've pretty much eliminated both of those attacks from my teaching curriculum part. I start with roundhouses, and about a year ago, somebody had found a real world knife attack that had somebody coming in and actually successfully stabbed the target in the top of the chest, and immediately it was, oh look, here's the Shomanuchi attack that everybody says doesn't happen anywhere else, and now we have a video of it. And it was kind of funny to see it. And it really drove home to me the point of, you can't say never, but it's really just, of all of the fight footage and fights that I've seen in videos and descriptions I've heard from people that have seen a lot more than I have, they will just say that overhead attack is extraordinarily rare. You might see it, but it's not it's not the, shouldn't be the backbone of your training stuff. And for the Yokomen, one thing I noticed when I would train fighters back in the day, one of the things that I would always ask is, how do I spot an attack coming? What should I be looking for? And when I looked at the typical Yokomenuchi, which comes up by the head to signal, what happens is if you do this often enough, your eye starts looking for that hand to pop up. So that's the signal for, okay, now I'm going to start my attack. Well, if you're starting with a raw beginner who doesn't know how to watch a body, this is helpful. However, when somebody goes to load, it's the shoulder that you're watching for, not the hand. So if they drop the hand down and you don't see it and you're used to seeing it, but the shoulder rocks back, and now that punch comes firing in, and if they didn't see it because they're used to looking at the wrong thing, to me that was a training deficiency. So by practicing with haymakers and attacks where look at the shoulder and tell the student, if that shoulder swivels back, it's a smaller motion, but you'll see it, and you'll see it right away, and you know that something's coming from that side, and you don't know necessarily if it's high or low, but that's what you should be looking for. The body will tell you, but if you're looking in the right spot.
Yeah, the haymaker, the big swinging punch is certainly in the UK the most common attack.
It is here too. Yeah,
there is. You go to an accident and emergency room on a Friday, Saturday night. It's full of guys holding the side of their face. You go, I didn't see it coming. You go, well, yes, you did. You just didn't know what it was.
Right. And if your training reflects what you should be watching for, then you're going to have a much better chance of dealing with it effectively than if you don't.
I like to call that immersion training, and I think we spoke about this before. The how many times has someone thrown a punch at you over the years? You've got to be getting into the millions. Yeah, your brain picks it up way before your frontal lobes pick it up. You will see it in the eyes rather than the shoulder. You'll see that, and that is because you've immersed yourself in that world. People have been throwing punches at you for years. You are so averse to it, which is why you can actually get in and control that first move. On top of that, you have, and I love this phrase, primal precognitive flinch responses. These are built into you. If any of your relatives didn't have any flinch responses, you wouldn't be alive today. It's part of our psyche. We have these flinch responses. These are precognitive actions. They happen without us thinking about it. If you have a perceived threat stimulus, you will throw your hands up. Yes, you may even go forward to meet it if it's a tactical flinch. Yeah, you may go completely fetal, cover up. These are designed to protect yourselves. This is an animalistic response to a threat stimulus, and yet some martial arts train that out of people. Don't do that. Do that. But this is slower. This requires now a level of thought, a level of conscious effort to be able to do it. But why are we training it out of people? Why are we not? And it's very difficult to, in a dojo, to train a flinch response because you're simulating a flinch. The only way to do it properly is to properly scare people and actually get them to flinch up. But if you train a flinch response, then you are used to being in it. So if you look at flinch responses, good old-fashioned blocks, not the ancient art of not being hit in the head. And then some hand deflections, you're pretty much untouchable, really. Some will get through, without a doubt, because you've always got to chuck human error in there. So some will get through, but that is a very, very good basis to start building the trained response on top of, if that makes sense. Yep,
absolutely.
It's all built into you. So you turn up. Tony Blauer, Spear, and he trains in one of the flinch responses. Defense Lab, which used to be Casey Fighting Method. Andy Norman, great guy, trained Batman. I cannot go any better than that. No matter how good a martial arts instructor you are, Andy Norman trained Batman. You go, okay, give up. Yeah.
Are you talking Christian Bale in? The Return of
Yeah.
Dark Knight. You know, it's funny because I heard as that movie before that movie was coming out that they had gotten this really cool art for Batman to have that would make sense for what that character would do, and I was absolutely thrilled. I was like, I could not wait to see that movie. And then when it came out, it was filmed so dark,
Yeah.
you couldn't see any of it. It was a disappointment because I had to imagine what it was. Now that's effective storytelling because when you don't paint a complete picture, the mind fills it all in. But
Yeah.
as a martial artist, I wanted to see what this was, and was sadly didn't translate onto film very well. So
Yeah, Andy Norman had a brilliant idea years and years ago, and he started Casey Fighting Method, and I can't remember that still runs. They kind of separated, and we have Defense Lab, and Andy's idea came about from the nightclubs in the north of England, which when a fight starts, everybody starts fighting.
yeah,
It's like your good old Western barroom brawl. And Andy's idea was, how do I get across the dance floor without being hit by someone? So he developed these shapes,
the head covers. Yep.
cover all your knockout points. And he thought, hang on, that's a weapon. If I step forward, I can now get people out of the way just by changing shapes. And it's really, really clever because this is your primal flinch.
Yep.
So he's building on top of what your brain and your body and your primal self already knows. So
and this would be one of those things where, you know, a sport fighter would say, well, that's great, but it leaves your body open. Well, sport fighters will pick targets of opportunity. In real fights, 90% of blows are to the head because people want to hit you in the head. So I love head covers, absolutely adore them. And
when someone is angry with you, which generally is what happens in a fight, they could be angry with you for all manner of ridiculous things. They're angry with your face.
Exactly.
That's you. They're not going to be angry with your knee. It just doesn't happen. All their aggression is focused on your face, and that's where they're looking, and that's where all the strike. You might get the occasional kick to the thigh, someone who's watched too many Van Damme films, or someone who tries to box if they watch too many Rocky films, and this is where most people get their fighting skills from. It's watching far too many movies.
Sure.
And it's obvious who you and I watched as a kid.
Actually, I'm one of the few that didn't, believe it or not. But it's certainly, that had its own thing. And actually, brings us kind of the next thing that I really wanted to talk about in here, which was, all right, so establishing if you were looking at starting a dojo or reimagining your own art or dojo, a real big thing is the credibility part. And sport fighters get their credibility from championships, from medals, from trophies. People admire and want to learn from the best. And the guy that wins the tournament, he's the baddest on the, out there. He's the one that people want to learn from. The lineage is the other part of the credibility side. People want to see certificates of rank. They want to see, high level black belts. They want to see instructors that have many black belts in a lot of different arts. The one about this one that's always bothered me is the number of people that I've run into that have got the lineage and the certificates out the yin yang, but can't really get their way out of a wet paper bag. Just because some guy gives you a certificate or puts a belt on you or whatever, it gives you a patch, it really doesn't mean anything. It only means something to people who don't understand how easy it is to get that stuff.
Yeah.
And, when I remember years ago, I actually had a guy who said, I'll make you whatever rank you want, in Aikido, because he was high enough rank to actually promote me to, 7th, 8th Dan.
Yeah.
And, but he would do this without us even being ever in the same room. He made this offer just on what he'd heard me talk about. And, I went back to him and just said, what good would it be? What meaning would it have if you've never been on a mat with me and been able to attest to my skill? So I mean, it seemed pointless to me. However, and this I think is very relevant, is I've had people that have come like during friendship seminars and whatnot who've said, I never really thought much of Aikido or what I knew of it But now that I've trained with you, I've got a high respect for the art. Like, I didn't think it was capable of doing what I've seen you do with it, to me. And these are other, black belt and higher level martial artists. Not to say to blow my own horn, but I've run across a lot of people, especially more experienced martial artists, that will say the same thing. They'll say, I respect Aikido because I've run into somebody that really knows what they're doing with it. And it has impressed me. Yeah. Now, that's harder to market than to make a YouTube channel that, of buffoonery, that they say, well, I'm a 9th level black belt or 8th level black belt or whatever in Aikido, and I can do this. And that stuff doesn't matter. That, to me, that has no credibility. It's the on the mat and showing somebody what it's capable of doing. That's where the credibility is. But that level of credibility is not reflected in rank, certificates, trophies, medals, that sort of stuff. And the one thing I will come to hopefully shake the tree of the rank thing was a quote by Napoleon. He said, "A man will fight long and hard for a little piece of ribbon, little piece of colored ribbon." And that, to me, encapsulates the problem of rank in, especially Udansha rank, within the martial arts. It makes people chase this little bit of bait to do the minimum they need to do to get it, and oftentimes to keep paying tuition. And that's the actual what's really happening, not so much that they build their skills. And that's, to me, a huge problem.
Yeah, well, we suffer quite badly in the UK, and I'm sure you do over there in the States, with no regulations, no in the martial art world. You could literally start your own martial art tomorrow, promote yourself to 150th Dan, minor deity that is, and start teaching. And there are insurance companies out there who will take you on, and you'll be insured to teach. And the qualifications are dubious at best. There are certain organisations in the UK that have actually invented belt colours. So we actually have new belt colours just so that they can charge for another grading, and it's kind of lost its way. I've always said proof's in the pudding.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, the Krav Maga world, there's 3 I can think of, and I won't name them for legal reasons. But their credentials, their background, I was special forces, I was this, I was that, turned out to be rubbish, turned out to be absolute bullshit, and that damaged their reputation. But at the end of the day, all of them were actually doing some really good stuff. But they ruined it by pretending to be something that they're not. Sure. And that ruins the credibility of the whole art. And you go, well, actually, if you look at what they're doing, the pudding, if you like, is really good. But they messed it up. So, I have certain issues with, you can be really, really good at rubbish.
This is true. And, and that's the thing of those 3 realms we talked about. The sport realm, they have their credibility, which is tournament wins. You have the traditional martial arts or the theoretical martial arts that have their credibility, which is usually lineage and certificate granted rank. And then you have the real world stuff. There's no credibility badges that come from there. Now, I'm working with a colleague and have for 15 years now. And his big boast, and he's actually actively avoided getting any rank in any martial art whatsoever. White belt only, 0. One of the most dangerous people that I've ever met. And his credibility comes from the fact that in 18 years in the police force, as a deputy sheriff, he's never had anybody get away from him, either on foot or in a car. He's never been injured in any engagement with anybody. Even though he's done very heavy activity in dealing with the worst of humanity, and he's never had a use of force complaint filed against him by any of the people that he's handled. In my opinion, that is the most credible. That really is Aikido to me. He's dealt with violence professionally. He's not caused any excessive damage. He's always protected himself, and he's exhibited control over somebody who did not want to have it and was actively attacking either him or other people. Now, there's no certificate that goes with that. There's no belt rank, but that's the pudding. And to me, as going back to the focus point, that is the pudding that I want to have for myself and have for my students. And I like you, I would never want to try to contrive some sort of rank or credibility myself to put onto that, to appeal to people, but just to state it in a way that says, okay, what you do is what matters. What you are is, and what you're capable of is what matters. And that said, I do find a use for having Q ranks, because it gives students certain and instructors certain milestones they know they need to hit. It kind of reminds you that, okay, there's some things in here that need to be added to this student's training by this next milestone. It kind of keeps you moving along. It's not to keep their attention. It's to make sure that their training is complete and you don't overlook things, because it's easy as an instructor to overlook something as you're going along. So that's what I find useful about the Q ranks. And I do believe that Shodan is an important threshold to cross. It's like a coming of age point in a martial artist development. But after that, I think Yudansha ranks are entirely political, and they're actually toxic and poisonous to the art.
But, I've heard of people getting their next dan by traveling to Japan, going to the Hombu. So basically, they've got the tourist rank, if you like.
Right.
It's essentially what it is. Not everybody that goes to the Hombu, automatically sixth dan. I've never trained in my life. Yes, but you've been to the Hombu, so you must be a sixth dan. It's irrelevant. And I would always bring it back to that proof is in the pudding. And certainly when I start teaching, and I will try and test this new Aikido, which we'll discuss the name in a minute. I will try and test it with Krav Maga people. I will go out. We'll field test it. I've got a judo club down the road, very, very good judo club. I want to take it there and just do a workshop with them, let them play with it. Because these are the people that will go, that's rubbish. And you go, right, okay, gone. And I would always bring it back to that almost pressure testing it.
You could also call it, and I like the term pressure testing, although I think it gets distorted of what it really is. It's the reality check. It's a reality check for your art to say, am I in a delusional bubble world, or am I actually doing real practical things?
But you're bang on the money with the Q grade. So, because you won't pressure test a Q grade the same way you would a Dan grade. Right. That's just wrong. And all that happens is your Q grade gets beaten and doesn't come back again. And they're all despondent and they're thinking, I'm rubbish and this doesn't work, gets banded around again. That's certainly how I would do a grading, would be a pressure testing, because I believe everybody's Aikido should be individual, because everybody is individual. Everybody has different strengths, different reaches, different ideas, brains,
body types.
Yeah, exactly. So everybody's Aikido should be different. And that amazing Enter the Dragon, where there's 500,000 people all in white pajamas, all doing exactly the same thing. Those days are gone. We should be focusing.
Thankfully, they should be gone.
We should be. Everybody's Aikido should be individual. So if you're going to go through a choreographed list of techniques, then some of those techniques are not applicable to this person. So how do you test?
That's always bugged me, that the testing that seems like a recital. Here's your attack. Here's your defense. Go ahead and do it. Like that doesn't. It's hollow. It seems, even at its best, it's very hollow, because there's no aliveness to it. Spotting what is coming and adjusting appropriately is a huge deal. You can't overlook that part.
No. But you don't need all of them. That's the thing. When I teach the control and restraint package for police officers, okay, in that there is 9 wrist locks, arm locks, pain compliance techniques, should we say. So lower level stuff, the arresting techniques, the come with me, in British terms, come with me, you're nicked, Sunbeam. I teach all of them, but as a practitioner, how many do they need to know? 1, maybe 2. They're the ones that they like and work for them, and they're the 2 that they practice and they get slick with. They don't need to know all of them. I need to know all of them as an instructor to show all of them, but they don't need this whole big tool bag full of,
and that's something that's echoed in the sport realm. The top competitors that I've been exposed to and seen and studied, they've got 2 or 3 really, really sharp techniques. They don't have the massive library, or they might, but they don't use them. They find success by being extraordinarily good at a few tools that work well for them. Whereas you go into the theoretical martial arts realm and people think, I need to know all 1,538 techniques in the syllabus. And when I've memorized them and can recite each one, that means I'm a master martial artist, or that's when I've completed my art. And to me, that strays into the academia kind of world where, okay, do you know which one you'd pick under, given circumstance, and go. And they brain freeze because they're a good librarian is about all.
This is the issue we had with certainly the British police firearms officers who have, you are walking tactical. You've got a handgun, a carbine, a taser,
pepper spray.
Yeah, CS or pepper spray,
baton,
empty hand skills, and sometimes you see them, they're doing Hungarian folk dancing where they're trying to figure out which of the tactical options to use, and by that time someone's just rolled straight over them. Do you remember, I like a good story, especially if it's made up rubbish. The fox and the cat. Do you remember this? Right. The fox and the cat are having a talk, and the fox says, I know 50 ways to get away from the dog. And the cat goes, I only know 1. I'm feeling a bit deficient. So the cat's feeling all dejected. The dogs rush over the hills. Cat runs up the tree. The fox, while it's trying to figure out which of its 50 ways to use, gets eaten. And it is that there's too much going on. Your brain goes into enough mush and mess in fight or flight, trying to get as much information as possible to decide whether you're going to fight or flight. To add more to that is always going to be a problem.
What I've found with most of the theoretical martial artists, they'll get to whatever art they have. They usually have about 10% of the stuff that is their bread and butter, will save their butts in a stress situation. It's quick to learn, usually easy to apply, simple, direct, but it's not very sexy. So what they'll do is they'll get bored with it pretty quickly. They'll realize, well, this is pretty simple, pretty easy to do, but I want to do that flashy thing over there. And so they go into a deep dive into the complicated, intricate, fussy, difficult to use, highly specialized, probably would never need it or be able to have the opportunity to use it. And that's where they spend most of their training time, to the detriment of the bread and butter stuff.
Yeah.
They get together with each other. It's like, let me show you how big my repertoire is. I want to show you this and that cool thing, and have completely ignored the practical stuff.
For a while, Ronda Rousey dominated the female UFC with basically 2 techniques. That was just, I mean, she did them very, very well. And she had a very solid judo background. But 2 techniques.
Yep.
Hip throw armbar, bang, 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 bang. And it worked. And sometimes it took her 30 seconds. There's a girl that didn't need cardio, wasn't it?
Well, and back when I was competing, the chess game really was, I know my opponent enough to know what their 2 or 3 best things are. I need to avoid those and be able to get to a position where I can apply the 2 or 3 things that I do really well. That was most of the game. It wasn't my repertoire versus theirs.
Mm-hmm.
It was my sharp tools versus their sharp tools, and who's going to apply theirs first is usually the one who got it. And every sport fight I've seen has been pretty much the same way. You know the strengths of a particular fighter, and if they get to apply them, they prevail.
Yeah. But certainly getting back to the credence, the lineage thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have a first dan in Aikido from an unregulated organization. They weren't involved with they weren't with anybody else. They were their own. So my credence is not actually that good. But what I want to do is go, come and try it.
Mm-hmm.
I want people to literally walk through the door and go, this is what I do. The reputation of Aikido is awful. I mean, for 18 months or so, my partner and I owned and ran an MMA gym.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were putting together what was going in there, we couldn't have Aikido in there because we were wanting to attract MMA fighters, Muay Thai, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, boxers, all these people. And the minute you put Aikido in there, a lot of them would be turned off. We didn't put, bizarrely, for the same reason, we didn't put lightsaber combat in there, because I said I didn't want these MMA fighters walking through the front door and seeing a load of geeks waving glow sticks around.
Right.
Spinning around and walking straight back out again. Because we were starting from scratch, we needed the reputation. So so we didn't put Aikido in there. We didn't put lightsaber combat, and it's really awful clumping them together like that, because they're very, very different.
Sure.
But we had Sambo, we had traditional jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, all these things that are not necessarily completely sport fighting, but the tools are very, very good. Because the reputation of Aikido precedes it, and it's such a shame. It is such a shame. I have hundreds of real world examples of Aikido working in the real world. So many of them where I've tried and tested them. What better attestation can you get for Aikido than I've been out there and done it?
And maybe the credibility for that is going to come when somebody gets that on video and posts it. And I know that there's been some exposure for, oh, look, this Aikido method worked in a real world arrest or a real world fight. And usually the comment is, well, but that doesn't look like the dojo Aikido. No. But it won't. It's the principle applied. It's not that the choreographed part looks like the choreographed part. It will be rough and it will be different.
Absolutely. The real fights are messy. They are
absolutely
uncoordinated. And certainly in the stress of real fight, you get skill degradation. You lose a lot of the skills that you have in the dojo, where it's all safe and calm and happy. You go out there into the real world, you've got the stress of it. And also, people don't come straight at you. They come at funny angles.
Right. And the criteria is, did it function? Did it do what it was designed to do? And if it's yes, then there you go. It didn't. It's not that it wasn't technically accurate enough, or it wasn't pretty looking enough, or it wasn't elegant like Aikido is supposed to be, or soft. It's like, no, did it work? One thing I wanted to jump in with, which was I think you made a comment about the large organizations, because people do perceive that if you have been granted rank by a large organization, that it is somehow more credible than an independent. I've found, and when I resigned from the organization I was in, which was a small one, I examined, like, should my dojo be part of an organization? Should it be part of a bigger one? Should I try to, look at getting acceptance into an organization for continued credibility? And what I found as I looked around was the politics within those organizations were absolutely horrendous. They wound up being either some kind of cult of personality or some kind of a revenue engine. that was made for gaining a lot of students, getting dues paid every year. And the part that really disappointed me was the lack of attention on quality student skills, like building strong Aikidoka. None of them had any of it. They had everything else, which was usually, oh, you got to pay a Shihan to come to a seminar, and you got to pay a lot of money, and you need to give up your ability to test your own students, even at Q levels. You have to make a lot of sacrifices without really any benefit. And I would therefore say that for anybody, and I know you're not like this, but anybody listening, if you seem to think that it takes a large organization to establish credibility, you're headed the exact wrong direction. Only when you have a quality instructor that's focused on your development and making you a really good martial artist will you find becoming having high quality skills, applicable skills. And like I said, the larger the organization is, the less attention there is on that, because it's hard to deliver that. It's very, very hard. It's hard to deliver it to a student you're working with every week, much less one you only see once a year or maybe twice a year. You have no input whatsoever on their development. And so there's that, and there's a number of things that make me think that organizations are kind of especially large ones, are a bad way to go. And speaking of organizations, one of the things that this is very timely, our discussion, was I noticed just recently, like 2 weeks ago or so, there was a letter written about Mori Shihan's decision to change his, and I believe it was Yoshinkan Aikido dojo to Aiki Jiu-Jitsu. He dumped the Aikido name because he felt, at least this is what was explained in the letter, he felt that the way that they train is more akin to Aiki Jiu-Jitsu than Aikido. Mm-hmm. And while I think that was a politically neutral stance to take, the signal that somebody of his reputation and notoriety would leave behind the name of Aikido was profound to me. Mm-hmm. It was an indication that the term Aikido had too much of a bad reputation attached to it, and one that he didn't want to have. And I've only seen a little bit of the stuff that he does in videos, but he appears to be a very effective, martially minded, like this has to work in a real situation kind of a guy. And I respect that. I've got a high regard for that, but I see that his letter seems to indicate, and I think this has probably happened numerous times in the past, although his was probably one of the biggest, a splintering of the Aikido community. It's fracturing right now. And the drift away from reality into something else. And I wish I could even describe what it is, whether it's a pseudo religion or a choreographed performance art or interpretive dance or whatever that is. And then the martial aspect are drifting farther and farther apart. And I think that letter reflects the fractionalization and the desire not to associate with the non-martial Aikido. I mean, we'll see what happens in future, but I saw that as a pretty major indication.
I mean, I'm the name is for marketing, really, isn't it? That's what we're looking at here. And I'm still kicking a few things around, but with Ellis's help, because he's like Yoda. He suggested using the phrase Jissen Aikido, Jissen meaning practical, relevant. And you'd have to get him on to translate it properly.
Sure. Well, Ellis is another legend of credibility. I mean, he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why I reached out to him and said, "Help! I'm going down this route." But I mean, literally, you just need something to separate this from all the other Aikido.
Mhm.
Here in the UK, I couldn't quite easily call it Camelot Aikido because why not? But
Sure.
it's almost irrelevant. But we for branding and marketing, so that
Right.
people understand this is not this Aikido, this is
Right.
this
And
Aikido.
and I wanted to touch on that too, because you've got it absolutely right. In marketing, it may sound to people like, well, that's what all you're doing is selling yourself. Really, what you're doing with marketing is providing clarity. You're
Yeah,
trying to paint a very clear picture of what people should expect when they come to you, so you attract the people that you want to attract, that you get the message to them. And the part about Aikido that is frustrating from a marketing standpoint is when you ask people what Aikido is and you cannot get a clear answer. It's like 20 minutes of weird word salad and it doesn't match even from one person to the next, but even the collective image is unclear. And I don't care what business you're in, if you're selling food or you're peddling products, if people don't know what it is, they won't be interested.
well,
And
when we were kids, there was Coke.
mhm,
Then came Diet Coke,
mhm,
and we know the difference.
right,
Yeah. And
yeah, it's clear.
Diet Aikido. There you go.
Right.
We've sorted it.
I like it.
Yeah, it's Aikido without the sugar.
Right.
But that's what it is. It's just this. I don't want to lose the word Aikido because I have a 30-year love-hate relationship with it. And I'm invested into that. And people know me for Aikido. The police officers I train, they come to me like, "Oh, show me some of that." And sometimes I feel like in June, the weirding ways,
All right.
weirding ways of, and
Yeah.
they look at you like you're a wizard. He's like,
Yep.
"Wow, what have you
You
just
know,
done?"
it's funny that I sat down with my students and my colleague friend, and we had this very discussion just last week. Not again, but I had it with them for the first time. But thought process has come to me several times in the last decade or so of, do I change the name? Is the other influences that I've brought in to combine and make my Aikido more well-rounded, has it taken it away from being what should be called Aikido? And we came to the consensus that we just don't want to give up on the name Aikido. We don't want to let it be sacrificed to the woo-woo crowd and the guys that weigh 400 pounds that stagger around and are waving their hands and having people flip over in front of them, that sort of thing. We would like to be a part of those that represent the quality part of the art, the heritage that it had of martial integrity. And to take on the name Aiki Jiu-Jitsu might be more clear, but it might not. But we all agreed that I think there's not enough advantage to change it in order to make that separation. We still, our hearts are with proving that Aikido is a quality martial art that fits in the civilian realm better than anything else. Was still everybody's interest. And but I think it's one of those things, like this discussion is good to have that review. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? Is it still fit? Because maybe in 4 or 5 years we'll have this conversation again and it will change, because the world is changing, the community is shifting, things always change. So revisiting it and making sure you're on focus and on point to what you want to do, I think is really important. But for the time being, and who knows what the Aikido organization landscape, I'm out of it as an independent, so it really doesn't affect me at all.
I remain independent. I have an organisation I belong to, the British Combat Association, which was started by Jeff Thompson and Pete Constantine, who are both legends. I mean,
absolutely
legends. And I can pick up the phone and speak to Peter any time about anything. And I've been with them for years, and I will stay with them. They support everything I do, including waving lightsabers around. Believe it or not, they were right behind me on that. But I believe in giving people choice, diverse choice. So if you want to, and I'm quoting you here, if anybody tries to sue, do the samurai cosplay Aikido, then fine, go and do that. But if you want to learn a scalable self-defense system, which is an art form, it's not a quick fix, it's an art form. We'll train for a lot, training will continue for years and years. Then they need to have that option as well. So what I want to do is give people the options. And certainly you would have had this where people come to you and say, I want to do a martial art. And you go, well, what do you want from it? Do you want self-defense? Do you want sport? Do you want to get fit? Do you want to just, train a few times a week with some really nice people and have a nice social life? What do you want from it? And that kind of steers them towards which one they're going to do, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So I just want to give people another option, or people to come and try it. And I hate the word try, by the way. Try allows to fail.
Sure.
But I want just something else. And I think through the mixed martial arts gym, it's not a good time in the UK to be opening gyms, running gyms. The cost of everything's gone up. People can't afford the memberships. We had issues with it, so I'm not looking to make a career out of the Aikido. I have several careers running at the moment. Sure. I almost want to do it as a hobby for me, and to give something back to other people. And at the end of the day, if it turns out to be is people get together to train, have a good time, good social life, good bunch of lifelong friends we make, and are making people more confident in themselves, that's a win, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That's a total win. Over the years of teaching martial arts, I look back and I go, I've created a few monsters, actually. And it's not necessarily that they're out there pulling people's arms and legs off, but people who have got confidence. I trained a guy who's he was basically being bullied by his boss. And through his martial art training, he got more confident and he stood up to his boss.
Nice.
No, what's he going to do next? It's one of those things. But I gave him the confidence, not necessarily to go and fight his boss, but confidence to walk up to him. Yep. And certainly when you look at pretty much any martial art that then transposes to the law enforcement or security world, I got into a lot less problems because I had the confidence to walk up to people confidently. So I didn't have the, he's going to kick off. And that diffused the situation. Certainly when I was working, I had 50 venues in Brighton that I looked after, all with door supervisors in. Some had 25, some had 1, some, different scales. And they would call me when it was all going wrong. And I would turn up and sort it out. And they was like, you're like some sort of Jedi. Little did they know.
I think that's how real confidence comes across to people. It seems like a magical power. Whereas false confidence is not very useful, very dangerous, but it's that real confidence that will only through real training done well, building solid skills, do you get that actual applicable confidence that will have that kind of an impact. Now, I know, just to jump track a little bit, because we talked about this in our previous discussion, is you've contemplated not only ditching wearing hakama, which I've done long ago, just because once I dug into it, I realized it made no sense, no practical application. In fact, it's the opposite, except for people that would wear a garment like that normally, which would usually be women in a dress. Like, okay, if you're going to defend yourself while wearing a dress, absolutely, hakama would be a good analogy, to wear. But you were also talking about ditching the gi and going just with, maybe you could talk about that a little bit, your thought process, about how you would do that.
I have yet to be attacked wearing thick pajamas. It doesn't have the final nail in the coffin for the hacker mode. Again, was Ellis explaining what they are. Yeah, they're riding jumpers. They're to stop bits falling out when you jump on a horse. So they're like, yeah, okay, got it now.
Right.
And he's brilliant at just stripping away the bullshit.
Yeah, and there's a lot to strip away.
Yeah. And so it's like, okay, I've never been a big fan of the huge trousers, as we call them over here.
Oh, they look great, but not practical.
No. And there are a second pair of trousers as well, because you've got a pair of trousers on underneath the hacker. So,
Right.
But then the gi is, I know it's traditional. It's an outfit you wear for this activity, but it's not a necessary outfit. I used to rock the police training world, because historically police officers would turn up in PT kit. Well, that's not what you wear when you're out on the street. You wear a uniform, you wear body armor, you wear a hat, you wear all these things. This is what you should be training in. And again, it's something I've ripped from the Krav Maga world. That they don't train. Well, actually, some do these days, but they don't train in gis. They train in what they wear on. You go train with the IDF. They train in what they wear operationally, so they're kind of gearing for it. So I'm much more along the lines of training in t-shirts, sweatshirts, jogging pants, maybe just to make the ease of training. But there will be times when I say, right, next week I want jeans, boots, I want a hoodie, I want an anorak with a rucksack on the back.
Sure.
Because that's how you are out on the street. And someone gets hold of your hood, you are being pulled out. And this is something that you've got to practice to learn to deal with, because that's what's going to happen. But also the constraints of clothing and things, certain things like that. It's something that you need to train for. If you want your art to be transposable to the real world, you have to train for the real world. And that was my only thinking. You get a brand new person turn up to train in your Aikido class. They tend not to turn up in a gi anyway, do they? They tend to turn up in. So why do we then?
I tell them just like workout pants and a sturdy shirt, and there you go.
Yeah.
So I know for us, I've kept the gi mostly because it's durable, we're also in a northern climate, so about 6 months out of the year, people are wearing jackets and whatnot anyway. Just to get used to the grabs. But I've also got a box of I got old hockey jerseys to kind of simulate like what a hoodie would be, or what it's like to grab a loose garment rather than a tighter. One of the things about some of the jiu-jitsu and judo is that it becomes a very grip specific art, which is very specific to the garment that your opponent's wearing. So varying up t-shirts to jerseys to hoodies to gis or jackets. I mean, all of that stuff is in the variety, and the same would go for pants. Grabbing somebody with, with basketball shorts on versus like jeans or, whatever kind of pants because you can grab a pant leg as easily as you can grab an ankle or what have you. So that comes into play. But yeah, I liked where you were going with that. Just re-examine everything and just look at it and say, is this serving me, or can I do it better? Can it be done better?
And the wrist grabs have gone in my mind. The whole wrist grabs, and certainly probably like you, I watch some of the Aikido videos, and someone grabs your wrist and doesn't let go no matter what you do to them. You drag them around by the fact they've got hold of your wrist. They've just let go. If I pulled you over here and you had my wrist, you just let go.
If it comes to the point where your body knows it will fall on the ground or keep holding on, everybody will let go. Like just everybody, unless they've been reprogrammed to flip over or roll rather than let go. Which
I think, obviously when Yushiba was training Aikido, there was the nod back to sword culture. Okay,
Mhm.
if you grab someone's wrist, they can't draw their sword. That is where I think it came from. The
Yeah.
wrist grabs.
By the way, there's a parallel to that. There's a lot of videos where you see somebody grabbing for a police officer's gun. Like
Yeah,
they put their hand on it, or they grab for it, and the cop tries to hold his gun in his holster to keep them from drawing it. So to
yeah,
me,
yeah,
that's a
yeah.
modern analogy.
I used to train weapon retention,
Mhm.
mostly
It's a real thing.
holstered and out because I told you before I had handgun out and a guy came to grab the gun. He wasn't armed, so under British law, I couldn't put 9mm holes in him.
Mhm.
And I actually did a Rimanagi with a Glock in my hand, and the
Mhm.
Glock went over his shoulder, buff, put him down.
Mm.
That's just a prime example of Aikido working in a real world situation.
Absolutely.
The last thing I wanted to do was look down to find my holster to put it, and you shouldn't look down anyway. You should know where it is. What was I saying? I've gone completely lost. The wrist grabs.
Mhm.
The wrist grabs are very useful for raw beginners to train the
Mhm.
movements.
Mhm.
And as soon as they've got those movements, then you transpose the wrist grab for a moving hand, a punch, or a grab for something more relevant, like around here, throat, grab. The only wrist grab I've ever seen is when someone's hand's been up and someone's grabbed that, so they're up
Right.
here and someone's
The one
grabbed.
that most Aikido never even addresses.
Yeah, this is where to stop me hitting you with this hand, you grab that hand. That's
Mhm.
the only one I've ever seen in out there in the world.
Live fire.
Yeah, but holding your hand out for someone to grab, no. And unfortunately, I have seen the defenses from wrist grabs being trained in self-defense seminars. Someone grabs your wrist, that's not the attack. Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
you just go, get off, you weirdo. You just drag your hand back. And but actually training techniques to undo wrist grabs, and they call them breakaways now, don't they? But nobody does that. Nobody grabs your wrist because it's down here.
Yeah.
Two hands grabbing your lapels, that's a realistic grab. But yeah, the wrist grabs will be for very, very new people, just to learn the movements, just to learn the body positioning and the movements. That's it, and then off, gone, never to be seen again.
Yep. One of the ones that I started modifying was, and I just call this the hockey grab, because we often get to the point where if I go to grab nage, you settle in with a nice, polite little, just grab the garment. You don't want to get any, hair, skin, or anything under there, and it's sort of a settle in deal. It's like if you get grabbed for real, it's going to be paw comes on and like a punch and clutch, and even adding that modification in starts to get students used to having an active, powerful grab on them. And like you said, whether it's double or single, that's a pretty common one in a fight, is to grab a hold of the garment and now you start pounding.
But that's not the thing to worry about, is it? The hand that grabs you is not the one to worry about. It's the other one that hasn't.
The other one that's got big trouble coming. Exactly. But to add those, it's still a grab, but you're adding a layer of reality to what somebody's likely to encounter, and to not be shocked by it. Like, this happens every 3 times a week to me. You power grab, and it's like, okay, I know how to respond. So, and what I've found too is that, for those people that might be thinking, well, the way I train Aikido now, the contemporary method of doing it, I like it. It's enjoyable. It's fun. That doesn't sound like fun, getting powerful grabbed like that and getting manhandled around. I can tell you that with new students, and even students I had over the years that we sort of were transitioning to, they had more fun doing that kind of thing than something that to them appeared to be sort of sterile and kind of fake and shallow. They enjoy, wow, I can deal with this. They feel empowered. I get students laughing quite a bit especially when you do a technique to them where they don't realize how easy it is to take them down or knock them over or get a superior position on them. And then when they do it themselves, they kind of laugh like, okay, I like this. This is showing me I can face, a tangible terror and fear, but I know what to do. I know how to execute it. Students always start out kind of rough with it, but as they hammer it out and it gets smoother and more effective and more efficient, it's very enjoyable experience. And I think going forward, the martial arts up through the 70s and 80s, martial art training was well known for being grueling, tedious, frustrating. You were often getting yelled at, berated. It was not a pleasurable experience, but by God, you stuck with it because that was going to make you strong. I think the culture now of people, when they take on an activity that they weren't going to dedicate hours of their week to, they want something that is going to be productive for them, that's going to be enjoyable, and meaningful to them. And I think martial art training absolutely can be that, because I've seen it do that. That should be the expectation. If you're an instructor, you have a duty, if you're going to keep students, to make it so when they walk out the door, they're like, wow, that was great. And I want to come back. That was a good use of my time. I feel much better. I feel more confident. Like that should be the experience. But that's just kind of my take on it.
Yeah, totally. We have to remember this is their hobby.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is their spare time that they're dedicating to. Unless you're training a military unit, a police unit, a security, this is their hobby. This is what they do in their spare time. So it has to be enjoyable. The chances of them having to do this in the real world are not high. There is a chance, but it's a hobby. It's a pastime. It should be enjoyable. Certainly, when I went through martial arts as a kid, abuse probably.
You almost expected it. Like you wanted the Arlie Ermy drill sergeant screaming at you, calling you, a wimp and whatever, berating you to try to motivate you to become powerful. I remember, I don't think that model is very applicable anymore.
No, it's not. It's not at all. I remember being, if we were late for class, and when I say late for class, if you weren't on the mat warming up when Sensei stepped on the mat, you were deemed late. You were kneeling, watching watching the class till your legs died, or skipping for the hour and a half. And if we did that, we'd never see people again. They'd be gone.
Right.
My jiu-jitsu instructor used to hit us with a shinai if we were foot out of place. Whack.
Had that happen? Yeah. Oh yeah.
And it was standard practice, which if we did it these days, we'd be reported for someone. We'd be speaking to people about it.
And I think the culture. I think most Aikido students and practitioners would say, yeah, that's nowhere near what my dojo is, and of course it's not.
Yeah, no.
I think the other culture part that needs to be taken down is the serene guru image of the instructor, who is the peaceful warrior who must be revered and worshipped.
Yeah.
That's the one that I see as pretty toxic and common in the Aikido world.
Yeah.
Is your instructor is to be revered to the point of like almost a godlike sort of status. And I think that the distortion that happens there, and this is where people like Dillman got so used to being worshipped and have his students do whatever he merely suggested by words, that he got into that no touch knockout nonsense. And I think we've seen that with no touch throws. That is where too much reverence goes. If it's the naked emperor that's walking around with his new clothes, and you're just like, wow, look at these threads. If you play into that and you lose the honesty and the integrity of saying, this needs to be tested. And I tell you what, I make this total confession. I have felt it myself personally. I was at a seminar of a well-known Shihan, and I won't name him. And I got brought up to be uke for a demonstration at this seminar. And I felt the social pressure, like, okay, I need to be a good uke for him. and he was showing his typical curriculum, which is these little bitty wrist turns, with the internal motion with his center and everything, expecting me to just flip over and roll. And I grabbed him with intensity, but his motions were so small that they just didn't move me. And it wasn't like I was trying to be a jerk, but I suddenly felt like, oh my God, I'm making him look bad.
Yeah.
I don't want to piss him off. I don't want everybody to look at this and go and question him, and so I started to do exactly what he expected, which is these rolls. And it was like, I came away from that. My drive home was me contemplating what just happened. Was me doing that serving the art, or was it serving him, or was it serving the energy of the acolytes that are like, oh, Shihan, you're so amazing doing these things. And I'm just like, it wasn't amazing. It was a contrived illusion that I took active part in. And that's one of the last seminars I went to, because I felt so wrong for participating in it. Now, but I still feel like I did not want to insult the Shihan. I didn't want to insult the students. I didn't want to break the magic expectation. My conclusion was, it's that magic expectation that was wrong. I didn't know exactly who to blame for causing it. And I don't care, but I didn't want to participate in that. I want to participate in training against somebody that's trying to take my head off and being effectively able to handle them.
But it should be
having to hurt them if possible.
It should be tested. The instructor should be questioned and tested and poked and prodded, and and certainly I've always encouraged people to go, oh, that won't work. So you go, well, come here and I will show you to prove. Right. I'm not religious in any way, shape, or form, but Jesus actually said you should be questioning your religion. And that's coming from the bloke who started it, pretty much.
Right.
But it should be. We should be questioning these things. We should be testing these things. And if you were at school and you didn't understand something, you'd go, how, why? You'd want to understand. Learning styles. Activists, pragmatists, theorists, and reflectors. Two of those need to know how it works. So they need to come to you and go, show me, prove a point. I need to dismantle it and put it back together to understand it. So you should be being tested. And if something really doesn't work, you should have to go, right, oh yeah, you're right, actually, that's rubbish. In that scenario. I had, training out in Libya. I was teaching unarmed combat, essentially Krav Maga. Couldn't call it Krav Maga because it's Hebrew, and that's an Arab country. It doesn't work. But I was teaching an awful lot of Aikido to the Libyan protection teams. Now, it's a bit of a strange place. A lot of the police and military are also in a militia. And funny enough, it was Kota Gaeshi. I was just showing them the intricacies, the finger. Get that. That's a lot better. And this guy went all on me. So I was like, fair enough. So I took his balance and took him down with a bit of piss and vinegar behind it, should we say.
Sure.
And he stormed off. And everyone went, oh, he's one of the militia leaders. And I'm thinking, oh, no, we're going to get murdered now. But he came back and just nodded, shook my hand, gave me a hug, and went, good. So I was like, but the idea behind it was I was demonstrating that if you've never been in that world where I'm demonstrating, so just relax. You don't know you're supposed to do it.
Right.
The situation. So I proved a point to him, and he came back once he'd mended his wrist, and he came back and just said, yeah, good, and trained on. But I believe these things should be tested. Instructors should be tested.
And that's the thing too. I've noticed over the years when new students come in, they'll usually have a bit of curiosity. They're interested in the art, but they don't know everything about it or enough. And they will want to test a bit. Like in their mind, they're thinking, all right, I'd like to see what this does against a good, solid, whatever it is, a grip, attack, a punch. Show me what that is. And a lot of times I've seen Aikido instructors and students say, you have to change your attitude. Don't be that active, or don't provide this resistance, or try to be clever, or try to, fight out of it. That's not what we do. In my opinion, that's the wrong message. That attitude should be right at the center of that's where the integrity is of your art. Is, all right, try a spirited attack, try grabbing me, try to adjust, my art needs to work to deal with that. And I came upon that about midway through my Q experience, somewhere around purple belt. I realized, oh, well, there's some ukes I don't like dealing with because they're complex. And it suddenly dawned on me like a light bulb. I need to be able to deal with complex. Like, give me complexity, jack my technique up, start ruining it, so I know how to shore it up so that I can handle somebody that's unpredictable, that's trying to be evasive, that's trying to be resistant. I should be able to cover all that. I want to cover all that. That was where my ambition came out, even though, because in the early Q ranks, you're still trying to sort out fundamentals. You're not ready for those variables yet.
Yeah.
But you get to a point where, okay, those are starting to fit together and make sense. And now you start feeling, oh yeah, if I get a simple uke, I can really this feels great to do. But that's the choreography part.
Yes, yeah.
And I could have diverted and just said, I want to be really good at the choreography. Don't give me the complexity. I just want to be super smooth and elegant. And that seems to be where a lot of the ambition of Aikido training tends to head to. But I wanted that. Throw me chaos. I want to deal with everything you can think of and be creative as possible, because you need to push my boundaries. And I found that as I did that more, my boundaries got farther and farther out. Like, my comfort zone got bigger. And so that's what made me feel good as a student and as a developing martial artist in this hand-to-hand realm, was I want to build my comfort zone to be as big as possible. And you're not going to surprise me with anything.
I think Stephen summed it up really well, and I love his attitude and the way he trains. That if he's having problems with something, he will get hit in the face 4 or 5 times until he sorts it out. And that sort of training is amazing. It's brilliant. In fact,
absolutely.
In this country, that's why the Romans built a wall to keep that lot up there. That is exactly why, because of that attitude. But that is exactly what it should be. I don't know how to deal with this. Do it again. Right. Do it again. Yep. Do it. Right. I've got it now. And you work through these things. Mm-hmm. That's exactly
absolutely. And the one thing about the culture that I would change, and this comes back to that sacred guru thing, of if you run into something like that, rather than having the culture of a group go, oh, sacred guru, what do we do when this happens? You have okay, instructor, come over here. Let's get our heads together and break down what's going on here and how to fix it, and have everybody provide their input and value them. To me, that's a more healthy way of building those bonds between all the practitioners, to say, okay, I know you have a ton of experience and I want to hear what you have to say, but I want to hear what this other person has to say. I want to hear different interpretations, not just one viewpoint. Because that one viewpoint is the bottleneck, right? I like opening it up and hearing all kinds of different things. I'll give up what I thought was the best thing if I find somebody else has got something even better. Like, all right, bring that in. Love it.
Certainly what I've discovered over the years of practicing Aikido on poor innocent members of the public, they're not trained ukis.
Right.
They don't know what they're supposed to do. They've never been in and done a class. I remember one specific time, a guy grabbed me. He was going to throw a punch, and I got a very nice Ikkyo on, and his face contorted in pain, and he stayed right there. Mm-hmm. And I realised he doesn't know he's supposed to go down.
Right.
So I just got him down at him, gave him a direct order. Boff, he went down. So you've then got 2 control features. Yep. You've got the vocal and the physical.
Right.
and it's just something that the brain's like, he doesn't know. He hasn't been to class. He doesn't
You
know.
know, it's funny you mentioned that. I had almost exactly the same thing years ago. I had somebody say, "Oh, you do this Aikido thing. What is it?" And I said, "Well, it's a martial art that uses, throws and joint locks." And he's like, "What's a joint lock?" He had no idea. So I said, "Well, give me your hand." And he held it out, and I did exactly the same thing. I got it into a Nikyo, and rather than moving, he's just like, "Ow, ow, 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 ow." Had no idea that a joint could be locked, or what to do if it did get locked, or if he felt, pain in it, what to do.
Most people, the instinctive is to move away from the pain, and that's what we use to control them. We use their natural instinct to move away from the pain, but not everybody does it. And then you've got to start adding things like drink, drugs, mental illness. People who don't feel the pain, they don't register the pain. There was a guy I dealt with years and years ago who was on PCP, Angel Dust, and he was just randomly punching people on a pedestrian precinct.
Wow.
He wasn't backing off. And in those days, we had the Tonfa side handle baton, PR24. And I smacked him about the legs a lot, hard, and he wasn't even flinching.
Wow.
And he's okay. So yeah, I went literally baton went across his throat, choked him out. Both. I don't care how mad, crazy, or drugged up you are. You cut the oxygen off to the brain, you go to sleep.
That's true.
Get physiological on him. But it was horrific at the time because he just wasn't aware of it. Long story short, it turned out someone had spiked his drink when he came down and got wheelchaired out of the custody block in the morning with his legs in bits. Nicest guy on the planet. Another one of these things. He'd taken something that he wasn't aware of, and it affected him badly, and he was horrified with his actions. But it's one of those situations where, hang on a minute, this is what happens in training. They normally fall down now, but yeah, it just wasn't happening. So
and if that's the description of martial arts, is dealing with the unexpected,
training for failure, I think.
Training for failure, having your training prepare you for as much as possible, and opening it up that way and looking at it that way. Like you might have to do ridiculous things that you never thought you would ever have to do, but you might have to do them.
But also the training for failure, especially with the wrist locks and joint locks and the pain compliance techniques. They have a high failure rate, especially under the stress of combat. Your body makes its own painkiller.
Absolutely.
It's one of the 152 chemical changes that go on in fight or flight. It makes its own painkiller. You're not going to feel the lock like it should do. So you have to train something else.
Absolutely.
Well,
this has been a great discussion. I hate to cut it, but I just realized we've been going an hour 40 minutes, and if our last discussion was anything indicative, we could go on for more hours with it. And I'd love to have you back on the podcast to keep chatting. And you're just so interesting to talk to, and have got such great things to share with everybody. Is there anything you'd like to say to wrap things up?
Yeah, I just want to thank you actually for putting this together, this podcast. I've been through them all, and at one point I felt strangely stalkerish because I was messaging you on Facebook Messenger whilst listening to you on a podcast, and I thought it's getting a bit weird. But you've become almost like a chairman, should we say, and you're gathering people together, me included, and some great people, and everybody who comes on your podcast has had something really valid points to put across. I have a notebook. Actually, for my birthday, I got a lovely leather-bound notebook, and that is my notebook for what I'm making my Aikido into. And I listen to the podcast, and I open the notebook, and I write stuff down.
Nice.
And it is full of quotes from you, from your guests, and it's. I think I said before, I'm seeing myself as a Robin Hood of Aikido. I'm stealing from everybody, just stealing like that, and then I will give that to the poor.
Sure. Well, I thank you very much for saying it's great to hear, to have the impact that I do. And I'll just share this for my listeners. I'd put a lot of content out, and I hear back occasionally from people, but most of it is transmission that goes one way. So it's really wonderful and heartwarming to hear feedback and to get contact. I like being contacted by listeners or people that have comments or would like to ask a question, or, I love this. The martial arts are my passion. Mm-hmm. And so I love sharing my passion. I love people like you that share their passion with me. It's heartwarming to see that there's some redemption with Aikido, and it's cool to be a part of that. I don't view myself as any kind of chairman, but I do appreciate the compliment. But if I can at least facilitate gathering those people together of like mind so we can share with each other, like that to me has great value and could be where at least a portion of Aikido's future can be in a positive way, grow in a positive way. And I would love to be that's the reason I put this together, and I'm trying to gather us together. So, it's been great having you on the channel. By the way, I love the idea, especially that as you're putting this together, you have such a strong real world background. I think Aikido needs that. It is absolutely crucial, and it won't survive without people like you who can be the reality check to say, this does work. I've used this in real life repeatedly, and I know better. I know what does and what does not function. I think that is the most important influence that Aikido can have going forward if it's going to be a practical art for civilians, violence professionals, security, police, all of that sort of thing. That has to come from credible people like you from the field.
Yeah, but I'm not the only one. You've got Matt.
Oh no, there's plenty more.
Yeah, I would love for a time where we can all meet up.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
All meet up somewhere and run workshops and seminars. And I don't like the phrase seminar. I've never liked it. I prefer workshop.
Yeah. I prefer workshop too.
Yeah, because it means you. If it's a seminar, I'm showing you stuff and you do it. If it's a workshop, we're all
the sacred guru problem.
we're all working through this. We're all like, oh, that's a good idea. Stop everyone. He's done something really good. Boff. So it's not all about. But yeah, if it'd be great if we could all meet up and then go and invade a small country.
Yeah, absolutely. There's plenty out there.
Yeah.
That are ripe for the picking. Well, cool. Thank you very much, John. It's been great having you on. I'm looking forward to other discussions just because the 2 times we've talked now, I've just enjoyed them immensely, and I think everybody else will too. For those listening, please drop a comment if you have questions for John and I, or for John, or would like to see him back, or things you'd like us to talk about, or even suggestions for other guests or topics you'd like me to find a guest to discuss. Love to hear back on what you think. So thank you again, John. It was great having you on today.
Thank you very much.
All right, take care, everybody, and until the next episode, go enjoy your training.
Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this discussion. Stay tuned for more episodes. I've got some great stuff on the way very soon. In the meantime, enjoy your training.